Let's get the show on the road. Welcome to Weekend Tea Practice. Ree and Steven here from Las Vegas. We are having a very, very good week, actually. As you're joining us for today's tea practice. We're coming in from a 3-day weekend in Yosemite National Park. So we're pretty happy. We're pretty cheerful. I hope we look all like doe-eyed and blushy and dewy from our 3-day weekend. I hope that you guys are doing well today. We are going to be doing a Korean green tea study today, which I hope that for you guys who are talking about Korean teas for New Horizons, join us in this practice if you can. It's going to be a kind of lineup of all the 5. Actually, it's going to be 6 that we got from the Korean green tea buy. But there's going to be 5 samples we're going to be testing today. It's going to be Ujeon, Sejak, Jungjak, Daejak, and Ipcha. So the 5 teas we're going to go through today are going to be Ujeon, Sejak, God, I don't even know. Ujeon, Sejak, Jungjak, Daejak, and Ipcha. And if you're thinking, yo, Ree, you don't really talk about Korean tea very much. If you were with us for last week's weekend tea practice, we talked a little bit about how we're trying to push a little bit our comfort zones in tea and kind of experience something a little bit different, a little bit new. And that's what we're doing here at Tea Curious. For our New Horizons, prompt, we ourselves chose to do Korean green tea, and Korean tea in general, because we're not that well versed in Korean tea. So for those of you who haven't joined the challenge yet, New Horizons is still going on. We still have 10 days till the end of the challenge. Just pick an area of tea that you don't know very well. It can be a region, could be a brewing style, could be just an approach to tea that you just haven't dug into as much. And you can kind of take this opportunity to get to know that different kind of tea, that different approach to tea together with everyone else in the Tea Curious Tea Fam, as we are kind of going to the unknown together. So that's what this challenge is this month. And we are doing these babies Korean green teas, which I have very, very little experience with. I've been doing tea for, over 10 years now. And I have very, very little Korean green tea experience. I probably tasted less than 10 overall in my time drinking tea. So very, very little experience, very little exposure. So as we go through this, tasting today, even if you are joining us, if you have these teas from the Korean group buy from the summer, I don't know what these taste like either. I've tasted them here and there, but I haven't done a side-by-side tasting and a deep dive study of these. So I'm happy to be able to share that with you guys today. Okay, let's say hi to our friends. I get so excited at the very beginning of our tea practices. Good evening to you, Chris Hall. Nice to see you, Rika. Tea Traveler, and Fish Anywhere, and J Dave 5, and Steven, and Grateful TD, and Luke CF, and Kim from Son Blends. Nice to see you guys. It's so nice to be home. We had such a wonderful time at Yosemite National Park this week. It was empty. We shouldn't say that because everyone's going to go there. It was so quiet. It was so wonderful. We had such a wonderful time. I hope you guys have had a wonderful week too. So yeah, we're all nice and refreshed and dewy and happy to have been in nature over the last couple days. But now we're back. I haven't even cleaned the dirt out of my nails yet, so I just realized we still got Yosemite, high Sierra dirt in our hands, but that's okay. We're gonna get started here. Let us know what you guys are drinking from where you might be. I see Joe, you're over at Ceremony. Must be fun over there. Say hi to Michelle and the crew for us. And then we will get this lineup started. We have weighed out the 5 grades of Korean green tea that we will be trying today. I need to make sure I keep these in order because they look very similar. I usually have no issues keeping teas in order if I know them well, but they look like green tea. So we've got from your guys' left to right in order of harvest from earliest to latest. Ujeon green tea, Sejak, Jungjak, Daejak, and Ipcha. And if you want to see the spelling of that, I think we'll type it out in the IGTV replay. But again, it's going to be Ujeon, Sejak, Jungjak, Daejak, and Ipcha that we will be tasting today. And then the range of them, I just have my little insert from the Korean group buy. The range of them is going to be from April, mid-April, up until June and later. So there's going to be like your early spring, and then mid-spring, and then late spring, and then summer is what we're going to be tasting today. So that's going to make a big difference in how the tea is going to taste, and what we're going to feel and experience and smell and you know, just experience on the palate. Hopefully, we'll see what happens. Let us know what you guys are drinking. I'm gonna roll up our sleeves here and get started. Yeah, how was your guys' weekend? I hope you guys have had a wonderful start to the weekend. We have definitely had a wonderful start to the weekend over here. Yeah, pretty good. Yosemite has really good water. We love Yosemite for water. So we had a really good time there. And yeah, cool. We got our 5 bowls lined up. For those of you who've been with us a lot in the past, we always line up these bowls for doing side-by-side tastings. And again, these are just standard bowls that we use for tasting side-by-sides. We always want to use the same teaware when we do a side-by-side. So if you're at home and you want to do a, you know, you're trying to side-by-side, for example, an Assam black tea versus a Darjeeling black tea versus a Nilgiri black tea. 3 black teas from different areas of India. So you're like, oh, I want to know what that tastes like. What's going to be the difference between them? Please make sure you have the same teaware side by side, because even the same looking teaware, let's say this big bowl versus the small bowl, and you brew the tea side by side, even if it's the same ratios, you'll have a different kind of taste, because every single piece of teaware has a different chemical composition. So we're using IKEA feldspar porcelain for all our side-by-side tastings. So that's it's nice and consistent. So everything that we're tasting is going to be only the tea's influence for this tasting here. And again, I don't really know much about these teas, which is really fun. We'll see how they taste like. And see, Joe is having some of the snow mist stuff from Matt. Was going to do the Eastern Beauty next, but getting hungry neither one. Let's say hi to our friends Matt Strep Throat and Matt Hatter Tea Drunk. Welcome, welcome to today's tea practice today. Let us know what you guys are drinking from far, far away. Again, we're tuning in here from Las Vegas. We've had some Korean green tea this morning, actually, just to warm up. So let's get started. So those of you who have the Korean group by green teas, you may or may not want to follow along with us. If you want to just do it on your own time, your own pace, no problem. If you want to do it with us, I think it might be a good idea to do it right now. We weighed out 2 grams of tea for each of these. So this is the Wujong. I'm going to show you what these guys look like. This is the earliest spring harvest, mid-April. And then we got, not that I even know, I'm using my insert here. Again, we're not really that familiar with Korean green teas. And then we got our Sejak, which I think is one of the most, you know, common teas you'll find in the market, Sejak green. This is after Gogu, after kind of like their, it's an event, in Chinese it'd be Ming Qian, or Ming, after Ming. It's a festival that they use to kind of like denote times and dates for harvests. So this is going to be after April 20-ish, but before May 5 to 6. And then that's going to be the Sejak. This one here is Jung-Jak, and if you're looking at these leaves and thinking they look all the same, I personally think they look pretty similar too. The only difference is they're kind of getting bigger and coarser as time goes on. This is Jung-Jak here. This is after May 5 to 6. It says after Ipa. I think Gogo and Ipa must be like festivals or important dates in the Korean calendar, but I'm not familiar with them. But they will use those specific festivals and events to try to denote different times of harvest. So this is going to be like mid-spring, and then this one's going to be late spring, late May and after. This is Daejak. And then finally we have our last one, Icha, which is basically like a summer tea. So you can kind of think of it almost like bancha in Japanese standards. So going from early spring to summer in terms of the grades of tea that we're dealing with today. And I'm going to just put the 2 that are the extremes. This is the early spring and the late kind of like summer harvest. You can kind of see that the early spring has smaller leaves, a little bit more wiry, a little bit more delicate looking, whereas the late summer harvest has these big chunky leaves going on now, which is what you would expect from a summer harvest tea. As time goes on in the harvest season, the leaves will become a little bit tougher and the tea will change a little bit in flavor. We can talk more about that conceptually, but I think today, because we have a lineup, we might as well just drink it. So I'm not going to tell you too much about what's going on. In theory, let's just drink it today. So yeah, let's say hi to our friends coming in for tea practice today, Moby DM and James from Single Origin Tea. So nice to see you. Noah and Luan, Esther, so nice to see you. It's been a while as well. And Brian S. Clark, welcome to tea practice today. Let us know how you guys are doing this wonderful weekend and what you guys are drinking. I'm so like dewy after Yosemite. It's been so nice. I feel like I have so much energy. As we're waiting for the water to boil, I have a confession. I'm not really a hiking person. I'm not a camping person. Or let's say I didn't grow up a hiking or camping person. The most that our family would do is go fishing. We never like overnighted in the woods or overnighted in a campsite. So, you know, getting to know more about camping and being outdoors and being dirty and stuff has been really nice. I grew up in a big city. I'm not sure about you guys. You guys city folk? You guys backyards, the forest kind of folk? But I grew up in a big city in Manila. It's one of the biggest, like, just metropolitan areas in the world. There's a lot of people there. It's very congested and lots of city stuff, so I'm very used to being in the city. But partially through Steven and then also through tea practice, I've become like much more like getting to know, you know, nature and how nice it is to be out there. And I'm at the stage where you kind of have to drag me outside first. Like, I'm never gonna wake up on a Saturday morning and be like, wow, let's go to like a campsite, Steven. But once you get me out there, I'm pretty happy. So it's a process. So if you are also city folk, don't worry. I think we all have our own journeys. Nothing wrong with the city either, but I think that sometimes we need a little bit more balance. It's really nice to be out with trees and air and water and stuff. So, and I'm not afraid actually to go out once I'm out there. It was very cold at Yosemite, and for a second you're like, oh my god, why are we here? Then you open your tent and like, wow, oh my god. Okay, so let's get these guys in. 5 grades of Korean green tea. I'm not sure you guys can see the bowls, so let me angle them so that you guys can see them a little bit better. There we go. So 5 identical bowls. We will put the same amount of water. We will not preheat these. Just because I think I might run out of water on my kettle if I preheat all of them. So as long as you're doing consistency, you know, don't preheat any of them, you're good. And we will do the 5 grades of Korean green tea right now. We will weigh this baby with a beep on our scale. We're going to do 100 ml for each bowl. And I'm going to weigh that out. For those of you who have a scale at home that you want to like be super precise with your tea side by sides, you can actually weigh how much water you put into each bowl. 1 gram is 1 ml, so we want to have 100 grams of water in each bowl. So we'll start doing that right now. And yeah, let us know what's going on your side of the tea universe. We've been doing super well here. For those of you who haven't seen it yet, we just released the Tea Curious Water formula last week, or this week, not too long ago. So that's up on the website now. It's very easy to find it. I think it's just water recipe on the site. And that has been the fruit of our labor for the last maybe like 3 years active and like 8 years total. It's been a lot of work we put into the Tea Curious Water formula. And actually today we're using the Tea Curious Water formula with a slight deviation. We're actually using slightly lighter than usual water because green tea likes to have slightly lighter water than most other teas. So it's so nice to be able to customize what you're putting in your tea. All right, so we're into 13 now. This is the Jungjak that we're pouring into. 5 grades of Korean green tea. 100 ml each for 2 grams of tea. Make sure to keep them in order. Oh my goodness. Okay. Almost there. So Sejak. As I'm pouring in, I'm kind of seeing that the leaves getting bigger and more coarse. which is what you would expect from the different harvests of tea. Okay, 100 grams each. And then our last guy, the summer tea, the ipcha. We will do another 100 mils for this, and then we will let these guys sit. And yeah, this should be familiar to you guys what we're doing here with the bowls, but this bowl brew kind of like method is something that we use a lot in the tea industry to kind of like evaluate teas. So if you come with us on one of our Taiwan tea tours, which you should, you'll see that a lot of the times, you know, if a tea maker is making tea, they will actually not, you know, brew the tea in a teapot. If they're trying to kind of figure out how the tea is doing, they'll put it in a bowl, they'll use a little like soup spoon, and they'll scoop it up. And I just find it's a very, very effective way of looking at teas very easily without having to introduce that unknown of the teapots and how you brew and stuff like that. I think it's just very consistent and very predictable what happens. So that's why we do this bowl thing. And also, I don't have 5 identical teapots. I might in the future, but I don't have 5 identical teapots. Okay. Cool beans. So, we are letting these guys steep. I think that we're finally seeing some differences now. Clear differences. If you notice, I'm not sure you guys can see, but this one here, the Wujang, is much more light green than the others. Compare that to the late summer harvest. It's a lot more dark green. Why that is, I'm not sure. Yeah, I actually don't know about that. I'm not sure if like late summer has more chlorophyll or something like that, or like processing is going to be a little bit different. And these are all from the same producer, Dongshan. So same plants. It's a cooperative of tea farmers, so it's going to be a little bit of a mix of different people's, you know, harvests. But overall, same producer, same area, same processing. And yeah, they're getting a little bit darker. Sort of. Yeah. And I also think that we can't necessarily use the same standards that we like to use for Japanese and Chinese teas when we think about Korean teas. Compared to Chinese and Japanese teas, it seems like Korean teas are a little bit more rustic, a little bit more, they kind of like have a, you know, they dance to the beat of their own drum a little bit. Korea's specialty tea industry is a little bit smaller. It's a little bit more like kind of spread out small growers. So they have a little bit less of a stringent standard, just from what I'm seeing, versus like Chinese and Japanese growers, where in China, they'll even be like, oh my God, like if you need to pick like when like the bud is like 3/4 of the way big of the leaf and stuff like that in terms of green tea, they can be very, very specific about what they require for a grade of tea. Whereas in Korea, you know, different producers have very different processing styles for their teas, different kinds of equipment, different just approaches, because it is such a small industry in comparison. So I think, as someone just looking at it, not knowing fully about it, they seem to have a little bit more kind of gray areas in terms of the grading of their teas. And important thing to note, just because these are grades of tea doesn't mean that one is going to be better than the other. So when it comes to tea grades, just because something is like, oh, early spring harvest or late summer harvest, I think we're taught a lot that the earlier the better for spring harvest, or summer tea's bad, or, you know, the more expensive the better, the more small the leaves, the better it is, especially for green tea. Lots of stuff like that gets thrown around. I think it's a good guideline to just have in your back pocket and like think about if you're buying tea. But at the end of the day, you guys know this, you just taste it, see which one you like the best. So even if you happen to drink these teas from the Korean group buy and you're like, oh, actually my favorite's the Ipcha, the summer tea, the cheap one, does it mean I'm cheap? Does it mean I have bad taste? What is it? It's not like that. It's just, you just like that tea better. So there's nothing inherently worse or better about the summer harvest teas. Why it is more expensive though on the early harvest end is because you're going to have, you know, more labor is involved in picking these tiny leaves. The plants are producing a little bit less in the early spring. Just think about like your garden in the spring when it's just starting to like come into itself. It takes a little bit of a while for everything to pop up. So early spring, everything's a little bit still like waking up and like waiting to become abundant. Then as you go on later on towards the summer, everything's kind of like roaring and you have a little bit more leaf material to work with, which means, you know, more leaves means easier to pick, more to pick, you know, more, there's more to work with. So yes, there are some differences in the ways that the leaves taste over time, but I still would say there's nothing inherently better or worse about a later spring harvest, summer harvest. Depends on your preference. Yeah. Anyway, let us know what you guys are drinking, how you guys are doing. Say hi to friends, Midney Blue, and Infused with Tea, and Trevelli. Welcome to Tea Practice today. James is saying I'm drinking the toughest green tea in the world. What is that? What's the toughest green tea in the world? Lipton green tea in a tea bag? That's pretty tough. Okay, let's get these guys going. I'm so excited to try these. I've never done this side by side of Korean green teas before, so I think I'm really excited to learn something new today. We're always learning something new, but something particularly new. Okie dokie. Interesting. So we're seeing that the lightest color are the two earlier spring harvests. Then the color gets a little bit darker towards late spring. Actually, the Yipcha. Yeah, I'd say it's the darkest. So let's taste it. First one, Ujang. This is early spring harvest. Let's see how it goes. Ooh, wow, that's very, wow, lots of flavor. Yum, 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 yum. That tastes like a salad, like in a really good way. Very, very fresh, very vibrant. Lots of like, I get like zucchini and cucumber. It's just so fresh and vibrant. That's delicious. Holy crap, I really like that. Let's wait a little bit for the aftertaste to kick in maybe. Very fragrant, very, very, quite a lot of flavor. Oh my goodness. Yeah, wow. There's a lot going on with that tea, just texturally speaking. Very soft and full. This is what I expect from a spring harvest, I would say. I think it's actually a little bit warmer than I thought it'd be. A lot of the super, super early spring harvest you'll taste from, especially China, tend to be very restrained in their taste. This one has a little bit more, I think, boldness. It has been steeping a while too. And yes, we use boiling water for these because I think that high quality green tea can take boiling water. So these guys are passing the test. They are steeping just fine with boiling water. Stephen have some. I'd like to hear your thoughts on it too. James is having some Fairhope, Alabama green tea. Oh my god! So USA tea. Sounds good. How do they process that stuff? And Esther's having some herbal mix from your garden. Wonderful. There's nothing better than that. I hope that the garden has gone well today, or this year. Stephen, your thoughts on the Sujong. And welcome to Mel from Akasaka Yuki and Kvensk. Welcome. We're having tea practice, tea study with the Korean green teas. So, yeah. Thoughts?
I like it.
Very, very good. Very nice aftertaste to really, really good tea, the Ujong. So this is the most expensive out of the bunch. This one here. Again, we're going from early spring to like mid-spring, late spring to summer. So there'll be a progression in the taste of the teas here. Really, really nice. I like this tea a lot. So it's important to do when you're doing a side-by-side like this, okay? I'm very kind of like cerebral when it comes to thinking about tea. So very important to also ask, yo, you like it or not? Yes or no? You like it? Yes or no? So yes, I like it. It's a very good tea. Yeah. So let's go on to the second one after we say hi to some of our friends. Just Vale. Jess, so nice to see you. And then Kim from Sunblends is asking, are the teas from 2020? Yes, this is from spring 2020. We just got these in maybe like a month and a half ago, maybe 2 months ago. So pretty freshly arrived to us. And we waited until New Horizons, this month's challenge, to crack into them quite deeply. And then James talking about the Fairhope, Alabama tea. Yes, we grow tea in the United States. in a lot of places, and it's pretty good. He cooks it at a very high temperature, he says, about the Fairhope, Alabama teas. Reminiscent of some lower grade bancha. Yeah, so bancha was like a later harvest, like summer tea from Japan. So if you can kind of think, if we have to make a comparison, this guy would be like a bancha from Korea, the summer harvest ipcha from Korea. Okay, next one. So we've tried the ujon. I know lots of different terms, very new to me too. So ujon is the early spring harvest in Korea. We go to Sejak next. Wow, much different. Wow, that's a big jump in flavor from just before the pre-rain. I mean, before Gogu, which is pre-rain. So I imagine the same as like the Ming Festival in China, like, you know. So this is like a Sheqian, the Wuzhuang. Sheqian is like a grade of Chinese green tea that is before like really early spring harvest. I'm not really familiar with the lunar calendar over there, but they use it a lot for grading teas. And I am using my cheat sheet here. So this one next is a Sejak. This is after Gogu. So April 20th, 21st. So after that, before Ipha, which is May 5 to 6. I should have looked up these events and what they mean in the lunar calendar, or like just in terms of harvest beforehand. But that's what Sejak is supposed to be. So if you have a Sejak before, there is a specific time, I guess, that they use. I'm not sure if this is based on just this producer is what they use for Sejak, or everywhere in Korea uses this. I'm going to have to ask that question. It's a very big difference from the Wuzhuang. Yeah, it's nice to be able to be uncomfortable and not know what's going on with the teas. It's been like so long. I'm just so used to like knowing what the terminology is that I'm forced to just deal with the tea, which is really nice. I don't even know how to talk about this tea. So yeah, this is very different from the first one. This is Sejak, again, just one grade down from Ujon. And it's a very bold, kind of like present, very green tea, very like just beans and grass and vegetables. It's like, this one is very restrained. It's like a very light salad. But once you got into the Sejak, you got the tea just throwing like green stuff at you. Like, it's very green. A very different experience. I think like this is like an early morning dew. You just woke up. It's very like, you know, crisp and fresh and just lightly vibrant. And then I'm trying to find ways to talk about green tea that are so similar. This one's more like, yeah, someone's just throwing like leafy lettuce at you. You're like at the supermarket and someone just dumps like a whole basket of kale on your head from like the produce section. It's kind of what this tastes like to me. Steven, thoughts? It's very different, I would say. Kale explosion, like veggie explosion. Very tasty. I think that I like the Wuzhuang a little bit better than the Sejak. I'm not sure what I feel about someone throwing like baskets of like produce at me, but it is very good. Just a preference. I like the kind of like softer green teas, but this is very good. Almost no bitterness, even if we boiled it with like, you know, boiling water. We use boiling water to steep it. Mark of a really high quality green tea. Very tasty. Okay. And if you're interested in how we evaluate, interpret tea like this, we have an IGTV replay that we do this kind of step-by-step process with you. And also, if you were at the International Virtual Tea Festival, we have a free class that we did. It's an hour long about tea evaluation, what to look for, and how to set this up. That I think would really benefit if you're interested in this kind of stuff. Side-by-sides and kind of digging in with different grades of tea, different areas of tea. So if you like, you know, comparing black tea from Japan versus black tea from Taiwan, black tea from India, really highly recommend this style. Okay, next one, we're doing the Jungjak. So this is after Ipha. So again, I don't know what Ipha is. May 5 to 6 until mid-May. So first grade, second grade, third grade. This is going to be like mid-spring, I guess. Very deep color. Look at the color now. It's quite yellow. Wow! Oh my god, that's so different. What is going on? These are all similar looking green teas, but it is so different. That's crazy. Same producer, same area, same season, same everything, same bushes. Okay, that's very different. This is very toasty. Suddenly we jump from like getting like rained on with kale to like toasty, and you dumped some kale on me, but first you stir fried it. Wow. Wow, that's very toasty. Holy crap. This is like a stir fry. Like someone blanched the greens and then stir fried it with a tiny bit of garlic is almost like what I'm getting. It's more cooked now. So very huge difference just in this short period of time. That's like a month's time. April 20 is Ujon, and then April 20 to like May 5 to 6, for Sejak, and then Jungjak is, May 5 to mid-May. So this is just about a month, maybe a month and a half. This is super early of difference, but don't they taste like completely different teas? Very, very different. Because if you're thinking like, oh, Korean green tea, whatever. If you got this versus this, very different experiences. That's really interesting. I like that. I think it has a lot of character, but toastier than I would expect from like a spring green tea. It's very toasty. Like really toasty. Steven, thoughts? Very warm.
Yeah.
It's like spring greens that you stir fried them. I mean, like it feels like we stir fried the greens at this point. Let's see. Saying hi to our friends. Mel's having a work break. So nice to see you on your work break, Mel. And I'm glad you have these teas. I'm so excited for you to try them at home as well. Rowdy Tea, welcome. And Tanya Landia, welcome. Brian S. Clark, whole basket of kale your head. That is a term from now on for me. Thank you. Yeah, we gotta find ways to talk about the stuff that is, more like approachable, I guess, for someone. Because if I say notes of edamame and sprouts and the underside of a cabbage leaf, it's hard to put those things together. So try to like have a feeling, put it into an experience. Because if you're trying to talk to a friend who's new to tea, or you're trying to explain it to someone who's not a tea person, if we try to dig too much into like the technicalities and the very specific tasting notes without the experience, I think it becomes difficult for them to wrap their head around it. So instead of being like edamame and cabbage, and I don't really like those like bang 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 tasting notes, and as someone who used to like use them a lot to talk about tea on a professional level, I find that it's easier to just be like, yo, is it throwing kale at you, or is it giving it to you on a silver platter with like, a small flower on the side? It's a different feeling for sure. And Esther, yes, I like these comparisons too, especially for other tea folks. Toasted like a kamaricha. Kamaricha is a really famous Japanese green tea, kind of Japanese green that is processed a little bit more Chinese style. It's pan-fired instead of steamed, which is typical in Japan is to be steamed. So when you steam a green tea versus you pan-fire it. See, we're getting technical. It's a little bit difficult to talk about. But if you steam a green tea versus you kind of like wok fire it, it's going to taste a little bit different. You can think about it like cooking. If you blanch some spinach versus you stir fry it in a wok, the taste will be very different. So yes, the kamaricha is that kind of like wok-fired almost Japanese green tea. And yes, it is kind of toasty like a kamaricha. These guys over here are very delicate and vibrant, and a little bit less delicate here, with the kale being thrown at you. But this one's more like toasty. Very nice. This is like a good autumn green tea in terms of like drinking. If you want to feel warm and cozy, this is a very cozy green tea. I wouldn't say any of the others are cozy. Steven, would you say? Yeah, these are more like vibrant, wake up, etc. This is more toasty, cozy. Stir-fried greens. So that's the Jungjak. We've had the Ujon, Sejak, and Jungjak. Such a big difference in just a scale of like a month. Then we'll go on to the Dejak. I wish I knew what these guys meant. Yeah, let's look at my cheat sheet again. So Ujon means pre-rain. Sejak means thin sparrow. Jungjak is medium sparrow. And Dejak is big sparrow. Okay. So the jak, I guess, in the name means sparrow, and they're talking about how the leaves look like a little bit like a sparrow's tongue, I would say. If you've heard that tea in China called sparrow's tongue, or sparrow tongue, or Sejak, that's kind of the same thing going on here. They're talking about how the leaves, depending on how like big and open and grown up they look, they're different kinds of sparrow. Sejak, Jungjak, and Dejak. Thin sparrow, medium sparrow, and big sparrow. So let's go on to the big sparrow, Sejak. This is late May. So about 2 months, maybe a month and a half after this one gets harvested. So this is the 4th grade of tea. Sejak. A little bit more cloudy now. This has been steeping a little bit longer, but when it comes to really good quality teas, I find that they don't change too much. So this is why I'm okay with it being sitting a little bit longer. Ooh, wow! I like that a lot! Wow. Wow, that's... These are so different. Oh my goodness gracious. I'm surprised by how not toasty this is. It's like they went all the way toasty with this guy, and they dialed it back a little bit. I would say this is the most balanced out of all of them. This is the 4th grade at Sejak. This is the most balanced, the most round, the most kind of like even, very steady, very rounded, very balanced green tea. This is like your friend in your friend group who's just always there for you, who like, when you're sick, they'll show up at your front door, and they'll never miss a birthday, they'll never miss a holiday, they'll always know when you're about to have your interview and ask you how you're doing. Very steady, dependable. If you don't know who that is in your friend group, it's probably you. That's not me, actually. I always forget, like, birthdays and stuff. Yeah, this is very steady, very, very solid, grounded tea. I like this tea a lot. I like these kinds of tea a lot because I personally tend to be a little bit more like flitty and, you know, I'm always in my head and stuff. I find that sometimes we like teas that are a little bit opposite of us. So I like teas that tend to slow me down and like ground me a little bit and like relax a little bit and feel like home and feel like a blanket, because I tend to be a little bit more jittery and anxious and overthinking as a person. So I love these teas that are able to like kind of relax and chill and enjoy, and I'm there for you. I got you. In terms of flavor, this is, I would say, the least distinct out of all the ones we've tried so far. It's just a solid green tea flavor, just very solid, just green tea, but not in a bad way. It's got a very nice texture, no bitterness at all. Can you imagine how long these guys have been sitting while we've been talking here, and how little bitterness has come into these teas? Very different. Very, very different. Yeah, I'm curious, what kind of green teas do you guys like? Do you like toasty green teas? Do you like delicate green teas? What kinds of green teas do you gravitate to? Do you like genmaicha? Very contentious topic. And have you had Korean green teas before? And if so, which ones have you had? I'm interested to see what your green tea experience is like for you guys. This is a very likable one. Very, very, very likable green tea. And yes, the tea leaves have been kind of like opening up a little bit more. And yes, Esther, these later green teas have a very vibrant yellow. I would actually say that the Jung-Jak in the middle has a more vibrant yellow than the Sejak. And when you see this kind of difference, you also have to think about not just the grade, but the tea makers are not robots. They will have differences in their processing just based on how their day is going and what they want to do with the tea. And if the tea is a little bit, you know, they feel like the leaf material is a little bit more toasty, they might process it to taste more toasty to lean into what that tea is doing. Think about it like cooking. If you have a tomato that's more bright and acidic, you're not going to want to like cook it down. You want to preserve that kind of like bright acidic note if you want that. Or if you want to, you know, if you have like a sweet, very like delicate tomato, you might want to pair it with like cheese. You kind of lean into what the vegetable is telling you to do. The same thing with tea and tea makers. They will lean into what the processing should be for the tea. If the tea is telling them, I want to be toasty, I want to be a little bit more bassy, I want to be a little bit more delicate, they will lean into that if they have, which most tea makers do, they have the experience to know that the leaves want to do something. So I wonder here if the Jungjak this year and the Sejak this year, being a little bit more toasty here, I'm surprised by how toasty this is in comparison. Steven tried out. You would expect the more like toasty, warm flavors to come later. Maybe this point in the season, the leaves just wanted to become more toasty, and that's why this is more toasty than this guy.
Yeah.
They lightened up here, right, Steven? Usually the more late you get into the season, the more heavy and more toasty and more warm the flavors will become. But actually here, I feel like they ramped up and then they dialed back a little bit. So ramped up, then dialed back a little bit. So that could just be a difference in what the leaves wanted to do at that point in time in the harvest. Because, while time is, linear, the way that the leaves behave, they don't necessarily follow that trend. They can go up and down depending on what the rain is like, the sun, the season, whatever. It could even be something like the guy who was processing this, had a smoke break and he forgot to come back in time to make sure the leaves didn't bake too long. It could be anything. So it's really fun to think about what happened in the back end. I want to ask if this is typical for the Jung-Jak to be so toasty. It is very toasty. So last one, the Ipcha. This is the summer tea. So a full maybe April, May, June. So like 2 or 3 months have passed between the first Ujang, this first grade, and the last one, the Ipcha, the summer tea. So isn't it so wonderful to be able to taste through an area's feeling from so far away? Even if we're in the desert in Las Vegas, we've never been to Korea, you can actually taste what happened in the tea garden that year when you do this kind of tasting. What was it like to be a tea plant there? What was it like to be a person living there? It's a way to capture what that feeling is, which I think is really cool. I really love being able to do that with tea. So I love these like side-by-side tastings for that reason. Friends joining us right now, Neil Zabase, so nice to see you, it's been a while. Kenneth Sarap, Mark from Steep Tea, Jessica, welcome. Tea Fiend, welcome to Tea Practice today, doing Korean green teas. Esther says she loves all the green teas, very little experience with Korean teas though. Likewise, Kim from Son Blends, is there a big difference in the prices? Yes, prices are very, very different. If you look at the Tea by Korea website, you can see the differences in the prices. Huge differences, I would say. So yes, there's a practical aspect to this. If you like the summer tea just as much as you like the, spring tea and you're on a budget, you just go get the summer tea. It's not a big deal. But I'm of the opinion you should just get both. I'm like that. I just want both. So yes, big differences in the prices. I think the Wujeon might be like, what are the prices, Stephen? Can you look it up really quick? We got this as part of a sampler, but yes, the prices are very different on these. And the Korean tea prices tend to be a little bit, more than average on the tea market because of how small kind of the batches in Korea are. And the labor costs are a little bit higher in Korea as well. But that's just kind of part of it. I think that we should just be used to, just in terms of like pricing, there will be teas that are more expensive than others. But in general, the more that you can pay for tea, the more you can support that area's industry. So if you see, an Indian tea that's a little bit more expensive than you'd see, but it's from a trusted vendor, you're like, oh, is it going to be worth it? It's a little bit more expensive. You can vote with your dollar in terms of paying for a higher quality product when you have a well-priced tea, I would say, don't necessarily pay for packaging, but if it's like a very simple tea, simple company, but the tea is a little bit higher priced and they have a connection with the farm, probably a good sign, just like these guys from Tea by Korea. Okay, to answer Kim's question, Steven, you're such a handsome assistant. So the Ujan is $45 for 50 grams, so almost $1 a gram. And then the Ipcha, oh my god, what a big difference! I've seen this before, trust me, but I just looking at it again. $45 for 50 grams, almost $1 a gram. This is $5 for the same amount. So $45 for the same packet, $5 per package. So 45, 25, no, 45, 20, 15, 10, and 5. That's so cheap. I can't believe how cheap those prices are. That's insane. Morning Crane does this non-profit, so there's basically no markup on it. So if you see this on a tea grower's or a tea vendor's website, it's a little bit higher. No, it's because those prices are basically wholesale. They're a non-profit. They lose money on the group buy every year because Arthur Park, who is the owner of Tea by Korea and Morning Crane Tea, has been working with these Korean growers for decades, like longer than most of us have been alive, and he just wants people to get to know Korean tea more than just again, Chinese and Japanese tea, but in the middle. So please do consider supporting them next year for the group buy. And if you see their teas on a shelf somewhere, buy them, because yeah, it's a vote for confidence for Korean tea in general. Please do that. It means a lot to them that they were really, really, really happy with the turnout of the tea buy this year. So if you guys picked this up, you made them so happy. They were like, wow, we're getting to send out so much Korean tea out into the world. Exposure for them is so important. I mean, they have more than enough people who like their teas in Korea, but even if you're like a well-established tea maker, just think about your tea getting to a new place, getting to a new city, new person getting excited about it. That never gets old for them, for tea makers, from what I've seen. And Kim, yes, I agree. The green teas from Korea give me a lot of sweet corn notes as well. Thoughts on that? Let us know. Have you had Korean green teas before, my friends? Interested to see what your experience is. Okay, last one before this guy gets cold. We just keep talking. We're so excited about this stuff. The summer tea from Dongcheon. Same producer. 5 different teas. We're at the end of the harvest season now. It's the summer. Ipcha. Wow. I really like this tea. Spoiler alert, I've had Ipcha a lot before. Probably the most out of all of these. It is such a happy tea. Oh my god. It's so bouncy and vibrant and happy. It feels like a little toddler walking around on the playground. Like the kind of toddler who's so happy if he falls on his face and he gets up again, he's gonna be like, yay! It's just so happy. Really, really happy tea. Why is that? Okay, so let me put that into like tasting notes. It's so green and fresh and vibrant. It's very uplifting. It's very up here. Lots of high notes. Lots of aroma. Lots of energy, So this is like a toddler, right? But you'd never say that like an aged shang or like an old shofor is gonna be like a toddler. Or like an aged oolong. I've never had a toddler image for like an aged oolong, right, Steven? Compare this to like a 2002 baozong from my teacher. That's like it's got some grit to it, it's got some wisdom to it. This is like a small toddler running through the playground. And again, he falls down, but he's like, I'm happy, I'm just gonna get back up and keep running. Steven, try it. It's such a wonderful tea. Beautiful tea. I really, really like this tea. It's incredible how good that is for how cheap that tea is. That's like a crime to pay only $5 for a bag of that stuff. Very, very happy. Wow. I love that tea. This is so good. I've always loved this ipcha. Spoiler alert. Eric is here, who is one of the people who helped so much for the Korean group buy. Tea by Korea couldn't have happened without you, Eric, so thank you so much. Eric is actually the one who introduced me to Korean tea. Told me, stubbornly, like, dragged me with, like, a leash, and, like, Ree, come on, like, Chinese and Japanese stuff is okay, good, but come on, check out the Korean tea. So he's been to Korea and actually, visited some of the farms that are in the Korean group buy. Wow, this is so good. I remember Eric giving me this tea for the first time. We did a side-by-side, a little bit more, like, casual than this, but the ipcha was just one of my favorites. It's just so, for what it is, so uplifting and vibrant. And remember, this is a summer tea, so you'll find a lot of people in the industry, because I've worked in the industry quite a lot. You'll find a lot of people, because of how they were schooled or what they were taught, they'll think about a summer tea and be like, summer tea, summer green tea especially, this is like, kind of tea that, like, it's kind of on the side, they can't do anything with it anymore, so they might as well make tea out of it. And in some cases, it's true, but you have a producer who's really passionate about what they're doing. They don't have a lot of tea material. They don't have like 10 bazillion acres to work with. They have just, their farms, and they're like small growers who have just a little bit of tea to work with. They will put effort into every single harvest. And so that's when you have a summer green tea that's like this, that I think is better than a lot of spring harvest green tea. So much love in it. Amazing. Really, really good. I can't believe how cheap this is for how good it is. It's like a crime. This is criminal. Someone call the tea police, please, and arrest whoever wanted to, which is Arthur Park. Don't arrest Arthur Park, but it's just so good. It's criminal how good this is. For 50 grams, you pay $5, the price of like a latte at Starbucks. I had a milk tea yesterday. I'm not judging anyone. We like milk tea with boba. We'll pay the $5 for a milk tea with boba. But for the price of a milk tea with boba or a Starbucks latte, you can get like 20 plus, maybe 25 sessions of this amazing tea from Korea, which is crazy. I can't believe it. That's insanity. This is very, very good. Just because something is a summer green tea doesn't mean it's necessarily bad. I want you to be able to taste through anything that anyone gives you. So even if it says on the label that summer green tea is supposed to be a little bit more like laid back and not as complex, taste it and see what happens. Yeah, just taste it and see what happens. And then when you do these kinds of side-by-side tastings too, because we dug so deep into it, we've thought so much. We've been using a lot of like our analytical kind of like left brain stuff to do this, right? I try not to be, so I think we've actually kept it kind of lighthearted, but we're still digging deep into these teas. Remember to ask yourself which one you like the most. Steven, which one do you like the most?
I like all of them.
Correct. I like all of them. I like the Ujon and the Jung-Jak, actually, which is actually consistent with what I've seen before. I like these two the most.
I agree.
This is very impressive, though, if you want to impress someone with a spring green tea. Wow. Yeah, the Sejak is like, oh my god, it's still doing that kale being thrown in your face. Like collard greens and edamame and like green tomatoes. It's just so rich with vibrancy and greenness, and you just toss me into the meadows at Yosemite and someone's gonna like arrest me because I'm on the meadows and they're trying to preserve them. It's so green. It's so green. Amazing. Really, really, really good. So that's very impressive. I would say, we've talked about this before, your tea toolkit, the kinds of teas you use not just for yourself, but if you have someone with you that you want to like share something with, that's a tea toolkit, like a tea in your toolkit. This is a tea I'd love to have in my tea toolkit to show someone what an amazing spring green tea is like, because that's like pure spring. And like your garden's overgrown and there's like, you have too many baskets of beans and tomatoes, you gotta give it to someone else. It's so abundant that someone who tastes this will, I think, instantly understand what the appeal of spring green tea is. Stephen, would you say? And then think, what would happen if you had the Jung-Jak? The Jung-Jak I like a lot. This is the toasty one, right? The toasty one is very good, but it's not what I expected from a spring green tea. So if I wanted someone to understand what spring green tea was like from the very, just starting off, I would probably not give them the Jung-Jak. Stephen, thoughts, right?
Yeah.
Think about it not just for yourself, but for others who would have tea with you. This is not what I'd expect from a spring green tea, and not, I think, what it embodies the best. I still like it a lot. It's a very, very good tea. It's much different from everything else. But if you're trying to understand what spring is, spring harvest is, probably the Sejak or even the Ujong. These two are very representative of spring. This is a little bit different. It's very toasty. Like, if you told me this is an autumn harvest tea, I'd be like, yeah, that's an autumn harvest tea. Very different. See, isn't it crazy how different just a couple of months can be within the scale of the same producer? And thank you so much for Tea by Korea being able to put this together. Same producer, same area, same season, just different times of the harvest. Very, very interesting stuff. If you have any questions, let us know. This has been really, really fun. We've had so much fun digging into these. I've never done this side by side like this before. And again, I still have my cheat sheet because I really don't know much about Korean green tea or what the different dates are supposed to be. So our friends Masubi Envelope and Gabriella and Mindful Teas and Eric and Sonia, welcome. Lo-chan, Mr. Rajiv, nice to see you. And Chris says, this has been super interesting, fascinating, that there's such a marked difference in taste. It is so different. Crazy, crazy different. I think that it's so easy to loop them all together. If you see the complicated names, Ujon, Sejak, Jungjak, Daejak, Ipcha. I mean, to me, not knowing Korean tea that much, it feels like gibberish. How do you say that word?
Gibberish.
Gibberish. Gibberish. For me, you know, it's just like getting to know oolong for the first time. Like, I can speak oolong language all day if you tell me like Milansha or Shaninshi or whatever. It feels like English to me. I'm so used to it. But when I see these, I'm like, Ujong from Dongshan or from Hadong Valley, you know, Jungjak, Daejak, Ipcha. It's still so new to me. Now we're forming connections with these as we're tasting, which you can't do unless you taste, right? But it's so easy to loop them all into one category if you're so new to that region. So, but that's okay. Like, give yourself some time to taste through, experience it. It's okay if you're kind of confused what they are. I definitely still a little bit am confused about what these guys are. I don't have much reference for them. But now that we've done this tasting, you have so much more like ability to know what someone's saying when someone says, try a Sejak tea, try a Ujon tea. It's a little bit higher grade. Try a summer harvest tea from Korea. And it's just so much that we can work with. So highly recommend doing this kind of thing, whether it's for Korean tea or maybe Chinese tea. You can do Sheqian and Mingqian and Yiqian, which is the different grades of harvest based on their spring harvest kind of like calendar. You can do Shinsha and Sencha and Bansha for Japanese teas. Do the same thing, and especially from the same producer, it's so interesting to see how they change over time. So many biochemical things happening, with the teas. So they are different in chemical composition, which is why they taste so different. But also they're just different, Spring 2020 was a year that never happened before. Every single spring will be a little bit different from the spring before it and the spring after it. So when you do something like this, you're able to taste what happened that spring, in Hadong Valley, wherever they had the tea made, when those people were there, when those tea plants were growing, which I think is a very cheap price to pay. Not being able to fly to Korea even, to taste what this is like. So I think very, very magical. I've loved doing this. If you're doing side-by-sides like this too, highly recommend checking out the leaves. So I'm going to scoop this out before we wrap up. Last little thing we'll do. We will just kind of like scoop up the leaves. This is the benefit of doing a tasting like this. You can easily scoop up the leaves in your spoon and kind of like play with them. I would love for you to do this every single time you do a tasting like this. Not only taste the leaves, but play with them and see what they feel like. What do they feel like in your fingers? Okay? And if you're like, oh, I don't want to touch my tea, like the oils of my hands will go into the tea, I'm like, also the tea makers' hands and their oils are on the tea, so don't worry about it. It's just leaves. Don't worry. So let's see look how tiny the Wujon is. This is the first spring harvest. You just imagine this little guy growing, like, early April, and like the dew is still like super cold, and he's struggling to like pop up new buds. This is Ujon. And this is a $45 for 50 grams. Quite expensive. It's more difficult to pick these little guys. There's not as much of them. And also the demand for like spring teas earlier, higher demand, higher prices, higher prestige. But such tiny leaves. Touch them. Do this, just squeeze them between your fingers. What do they feel like? Open them up. See what they're like. If you don't know what you're doing, that's fine. So I opened up the little leaf we had, and look, there's a little bud. So tiny and cute. It's just so cute. They came to like hang out with us and make really tasty tea for us. This is very, very soft and tender. You can even eat it if you want. Very, very soft. And then do it with each of the teas. Let's try the summer tea. So we're going from one end, the early spring, to the summer harvest. Then let's see how big the leaves are this time. So leaves are a little bit more coarse. So not like little buds anymore. So many tiny leaves though. More coarse, more chopped up. And when you hold them in your hands, they have a little bit more like thickness to them. They're a little bit older. So they will have a little bit more thickness, a little bit more like coarseness. It's a little bit more difficult to process summer harvest tea because it's a little bit less soft. And again, if you don't know what you're doing, that's fine. Like I still want you to like experience what it's like to touch like a summer versus a spring tea. So someday you can get to the point that I can give you a piece of tea and maybe you can like figure out if it's early spring or late summer just by holding the tea leaves without me telling you. We kind of want to get to that point if we can, just slowly over time, you know? Because there have been times, for example, like someone's like, oh, you know, this is a spring harvest tea, and I touch it. I'm like, I'm not sure, but I didn't say anything. And then later on, they're like, oh, actually, hold up. This is actually summer harvest tea. I forgot. I got the wrong bag. I'm like, wow, I knew that just because I touched the leaves. And that's just good to just be aware that sometimes the information you get is not, you know, accurate. So then you can trust yourself more and more. And you can also be like, oh, this year's leaves are a little bit harder than the others. Or last year's leaves are a little bit softer. Or this person's harvest for summer is a little bit more tough. This person's harvest is a little bit more soft. Then see what the differences are when you actually taste. So many things you can do to kind of like solidify this information in your brain. The more that you can use your senses to do different things, smell, touch, taste, look at it, you know, bathe in it, make different, try to describe it in different ways, the more the information will solidify in your brain, which is what I'm doing right now. So you might forget what ujan is called, or you might forget the name of icha and what date it is that it was harvested. But in your brain, if you're like more tactile, if you're used to working with your hands, you just remember the way that something feels, you might be able to remember the important part of it, which is what that tea was. What was that tea? Who was it? I like to think of teas as people. What were they like? What did they feel like? Even if you don't memorize the technicalities, that's okay. It's not a big deal. Some of the people that I know like know the most about tea, you can ask them like technical stuff, and they'll be like, I don't know what the harvest date is, but it's really good. And then they give you tea. You're like, oh my god, what the hell? It's not always about book knowledge. Somewhere in the middle, you know? Still very, very soft. Wow. And then I'm comparing it to every other time I've touched a summer harvest tea. And these guys are very soft. Steven, feel it. Feel how soft that is for harvest, summer harvest. I'm surprised by how soft it is. So then you're thinking, you know, maybe that where they were growing was like a misty area, because mist in a tea garden will tend to make the leaves quite soft. That, or the person who processed was very, very good at keeping the leaves like, you know, tender. That, or the kind of leaf material that they have is just very tender in general. Different things you can use to kind of compare. And over time you'll build your library of experiences and something that you've remembered from that tasting or whatever experiment you did, or that tea from long, long ago will come back to you someday. And you'll be like, wow, I'm glad I did that, because now I know from what I did at the time. I learned something. You can see the color of the leaves too, how they look different. The ujan's a little bit more yellow. Sejak's a little bit more green, more chlorophyll, I guess. I don't know. Like later on, they have a little bit more chlorophyll. They tend to get a little bit darker as they get older. Yeah, so many things you can do. So if you have the Korean green teas, be sure you do these by yourself. I hope that I haven't, you know, I probably at this point have changed what you feel about them once you start sitting down and tasting them. But try to erase what I said about anything, and if what you're tasting is different, don't worry about it. We all have different taste buds. You all have different approaches to tea. If you happen to like a much different set of teas than I do, that's the reason why we have different teas in the tea world. It would be really boring if we all like the same teas. So go ahead and do this. This is very, very fun. And yeah, in the spirit of New Horizons, Korea is its own tea region. We can't just call it between Chinese and Japanese green tea. For one, that's kind of messed up because historically Korea has had issues with both China and Japan. So please don't do that. Yeah, don't do that. Second, there's so many growers who are doing amazing, incredible things with their teas that are just flying under the radar because a lot of the things people say about Korean green tea. It's hard to get. It's more expensive. I might as well get Japanese tea. I might as well get Chinese tea. I respect those things. I felt that for a while, not knowing what was there. But then you're missing out on a completely different country. Basically, you're taking Korea, you're like getting Korea from your map of tea, lifting it up, and then like tossing it to the side by not being open to tasting these teas. And again, I feel so much about it because I did that for a long time. Korean tea is not that interesting. I got so into Chinese and Japanese green tea, so much exposure to them, that it's only now after 10 years that I'm starting to dig into these much, much more. So I'd like to do that a little bit earlier than me. So this has been really, really fun. I hope you guys have learned a little bit something with us. Even better, taste them yourself. Enjoy digging into Korean teas. Next week, we will do another Korean side-by-side tasting with another one of these cheat sheets. We will be doing Korean balyocha. Balhyocha. Balyocha. And balyocha is oxidized Korean tea. Another thing that Korea has to deal with is people calling it Korean black tea or Korean oolong. It seems like they just want to call it balyocha, so I'll respect that and call it balyocha. It's a specific kind of processing that is not found anywhere else but Korea. And yes, everyone has their own unique processing styles, but this kind of tea is only found in Korea. It's called balyocha. You might have seen it marketed as Korean black tea or Korean oolong, but the tea makers want to just call it balyocha, so let's just call it that. And it's a little bit different from black tea in that it's a little bit, I mean, I don't even want to go to the processing details. It's just different. We'll taste another 5. I think we have 5 of them from the Tea by Korea sampler. We'll taste 5 of them in a similar side-by-side tasting next week. Talk about what we're tasting, try to get to know them more. But while today we talked about harvest date and how it makes a tea different, same kind of processing, all green tea. Next week, this balyocha, from what we learned from Arthur Park at Tea by Korea and from Eric from Tisler's, balyocha is it's an older style of like processing that means that every single producer has their own technique of making balyocha. So instead of talking about grades of harvest, it's more like we're trying to taste different people's take on the same tea. So I guess what you can think of is like, this is like a tasting menu from the same chef. Next week, we'll be tasting the same dish rendered by different chefs. Does that make sense? Because it's going to be the same type of tea, different harvest, yes, but different approaches to that tea category, which will be very interesting. And this is important because it can be tempting to taste balyocha one time, or even other teas like Taiwanese High Mountain, or, you know, Dansong, or Darjeeling. Taste it one time, you don't like it, but there's so much variation within that type of tea that we gotta dig into. So that's what's gonna happen next week. So for those of you who have balyocha in your back pocket, either from Tea by Korea or just you bought it sometime, and you want to try this weird tea with us, you know, unusual for us, we're not used to it. Save it for next week. We'll be trying to taste it together, understand it next week. Another tea I'm not really used to, so it's nice to feel a little bit lost. That's New Horizon spirit. It's nice to get a little bit lost sometimes. Capture that beginner's mind. If you missed our tea practice last week on comfort zones and the beginner's mind, highly recommend watching that. And then one last reminder to check out the Tea Curious water recipe, which is what we use today. Super DIY, customizable, sustainable, cheap way to make tea water at home. Wonderful. Amazing stuff. So much work we put into it. 8 years of experience and like 3 active years of development. Over 100 waters we've tasted over time with tea to get to that point. So really recommend checking that out. Anything last things? Yosemite is awesome. Man, like I'm gonna put some photos up on the Tea Curious Instagram and Discord later on. But yeah, anything else? Any questions? Comments? Concerns? Do I got kale in my teeth after all the kale we've had today? Any questions that you have, let us know. We can ask our friends at Tea by Korea, Morning Crane Tea, Arthur Park, and Eric Glass from St. Louis about these questions. We got some studying to do because I'm like, I was getting so lost in the harvest dates. I'm like, I'm trying to like compare it to what the Chinese harvest dates are. I'm like, is this like Ningxian or Yichen or what is it? I don't know if it's the same, like, I'm not sure if it's the same festival, you know? But, yeah. Anyway, that's going to be all for now. Thank you so much for joining us for tea practice today. We hope you have a wonderful weekend, wherever you might be. Morning, afternoon, evening. Have fun with Korean teas. Have fun with tea. Tea is so great. I mean, isn't it so great we get to hang out and have tea in the middle of this fucking pandemic? It's just amazing. Life is good with tea. We really appreciate having you. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. We'll see you later. Bye-bye. Next week, Korean Biocha. Don't miss it, okay? Thank you so much. You guys too on the replay. We love you. Bye-bye. How do I end this? Instagram changed the shit again. God. Bye-bye.